I really do think that you'll never see an opportunity like this again. I think this is going to be bigger than the Volkswagen squeeze in terms of the proportion and the gains that come from it. It's going to be, I'm honestly, it's cool to be on that side of history, to be able to talk about the cause, you know?
I know you just mentioned the Volkswagen squeeze. I know a lot of people are curious about when we use that as a metaphor or an analogy of how the squeeze can happen. And most importantly, I think a couple of questions based on that is, one, will it be the same timeline? As in, will it stay on that squeeze number for a while? And so people who work day jobs or can't look at their phones all the time or can't tune in onto Angelo Money or trades 24/7, can these people still catch the squeeze, number one? And number two, if there is no big body like German government or Porsche in this specific instance, how can this mess up our calculations for when we make these analogies?
So I think the most important thing to talk about when you're comparing Volkswagen squeeze to this situation is the fact that there was just two main bodying entities that contributed to that squeeze. So you had the German government and Porsche, and they were able to work together really, really closely so that it was a unified effort. And that's why a lot of people don't think that AMC and GameStop will squeeze. I'm sure you've gotten it, but anytime that I make that comparison between Volkswagen and AMC GameStop, people are like, you can't make that comparison. It's not even close to the same. But we're not trying to compare the situations. Obviously, they're different. What you can take from that, though, is that Volkswagen was a very long process, just like GameStop was. So GameStop's, timeline between, the beginning to where we are now is probably about a year and a half. Back when DFV started really talking about the stock, doing his research, getting that initial investment. So what that lesson tells us is sometimes these things can take time. It takes time to develop that sort of game plan to get things moving. And the squeeze itself, right before it actually happened, they had a little mini run up. I would say like a gamma squeeze. It ran up to about 150 euros, dipped all the way back down to previous levels, as we saw with both GameStop and AMC. And then squoze, right? And it was a couple-day process. And then from there, about a month-long process of slow bleeding until stabilizing at a normal stock price, per se. So what we can learn from that is that first lesson, which we just talked about. And the second thing, which is you're not going to miss out on the squeeze. There's going to be, maybe you'll miss time the exact pinpoint top, but just like you can never guess the absolute bottom of a stock, you can never guess the absolute top of a stock either. And we need to be able to recognize that. You might leave a little bit on the top, and that's okay. There's only going to be as few select individuals. I mean, if you think about it, it's all about supply and demand. When you make a sell, somebody has to buy it. When you make a buy, someone has to sell it, right? So there's only going to be a select few people that actually get that top of the peak, and to expect that's going to happen for you is unrealistic, right? There's only going to be maybe a couple hundred people, a couple thousand people that happens to. So my takeaway from that is, you're going to have the opportunity. There's going to be a chance. So.
That's good. That's good to hear. And especially since people are waiting on just the most important lifeline news, right? Like, what is the number I call when an emergency happens? Like, these are just basic bread and butter fundamentals that they have to fully cover to be able to, when they listen to our analyses, some of it might go over their head, some of it might stick. But honestly, at the end of the day, the big questions here are, when is the squeeze going to happen? If we can't predict when, then at the very least, would we know if it's going to happen, if it's happening currently?